North Korea is at it again. They launched an intercontinental ballistic missile off its east coast, its first long-range missile since July 2023. The missile was fired from Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, and it landed somewhere 620 miles to the east in waters between the Korean Peninsula and Japan. As in previous intercontinental ballistic missile tests, North Korea launched the missile at a steep angle, apparently so it would not fly over Japan. South Korean officials have said that they were analyzing the launch to determine what type of ICBM it was. The United States and its allies, particularly South Korea and Japan, have become increasingly worried and concerned about North Korea's frequent missile tests under its leader Kim Jong-un, because the country claims to have developed a new small nuclear warhead that it can mount on its various missiles. And after the attack, the United States highlighted its commitment to defend South Korea by expanding joint military drills, inviting South Korean officials to the test launch of an American ICBM, and sending U.S. aircraft carriers, strategic bombers, and nuclear missile submarines to visit the ally. Well, this is, of course, a grave matter which is developing on a daily basis in Southeast Asia. Major General Dr. G.G. Dwivedi, Global Strategic and Defense Expert, joins us on the broadcast. Mr. Rabindra Sachdev, International Affairs Expert, also with us on the program. Last but not the least, Professor Madhav Nalapad, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, also with us on the program. Professor Nalapad, if you're testing missiles off the coast of your enemies, if you're sending these messages, I'm sure you're not doing it to appease the people back home. You're not doing it because Kim Jong-un can afford these as toys. There's obviously a strategy behind it. There is a palpable threat that perhaps countries like Japan and South Korea feel at this point in time. And perhaps, it's China, that's standing a little far away from all this tension and mocking this scenario which is going on between North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and some of the Southeast Asian countries. What do you think is to be gained by North Korea by having this animosity with Japan, or that, for that matter, any other country, when they do not have the kind of diplomatic relationship that perhaps, for example, a South Korea does?
Well, the fact of the matter is that North Korea has been heavily
sanctioned. Sir, I can't hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Hello? North Korea has been
Yeah, I can hear you now, sir.
Very heavily sanctioned. And frankly, it's been pushed in that corner. Kim Jong-un did try to mend fences in the United States. When Donald Trump was there, they had a meeting in Singapore, but nothing came of it because the non-proliferation warriors in the United States were very adamant that North Korea should give up its nuclear weapons as well as the missile systems. It's never going to do that. After what happened to Saddam Hussein, after he surrendered WMD, after what happened to Muammar Gaddafi, after he surrendered WMD, Kim Jong-un is not going to repeat what these two individuals did and take the risk of going there himself. The fact is that Kim Jong-un believes that the only way he can protect himself and his grip on power, the grip of the Kim family on power, is by having a deterrent, a nuclear deterrent capability. And that is why, frankly, they are not going to surrender their nuclear weapons at all. It is a question of regime survival. So these tests are essentially to give a warning that, look, we have the capacity. And now the warning is we have the capacity to reach not only the East Coast, but but any part of the United States. And that is actually the significance of this particular launch. The launch is basically as a deterrent against any attack on North Korea, where the North Korean leadership is paranoid that their efforts will be on to engineer regime change. One of the symptoms of that, constant purges of individuals in North Korea, senior people who are under suspicion for valid or invalid reasons. So the main objective of this missile launch is, if I may say so, avoid regime change.
Absolutely, sir. General Dwivedi, so where do you stand on this? Is this just mere posturing on behalf of North Korea? For some reason or the other, they have to stay relevant not only to their enemies but also to the world. Perhaps not so much to the world as much as South Korea in this case. But if you throw in the American twist and China into this, how do you see this geopolitical scenario?
Well, we need to understand the maverick actions of Kim Jong-un. You need to understand the larger dynamics of Korean Peninsula in the realm of Far East Asia. And having served as defense attaché in both North Korea and China, I can give you a little deeper insight. First and foremost, this strategic balancing that goes on the Korean Peninsula between the two axis powers. One is, of course, America, South Korea, Japan, and we all know that in South Korea, America has a presence of about 25,000 US troops and about 40,000 in Japan. So therefore, Korean Peninsula is very important for America and its allies, South Korea and Japan. On the other side, we have China, Russia, and North Korea. North Korea actions cannot be seen in isolation. They got to be seen in the perspective of China and Russia as to how they want to balance out the American axis. And that's where Kim Jong-un is a very handy tool in the hands of, especially for China and also for Russia. And actions of Kim Jong-un are not independent. They are very much orchestrated by these two powers, and in particular Beijing, because North Korea cannot survive without the assistance and help of China. So when you see these actions, there is a background. Moment you find there's some kind of balancing takes place. Now recently there was a consultative nuclear group meeting in Washington where South Korea and Washington, America, have had discussions as to how to bolster the nuclear capability on the Korean Peninsula. And therefore, this is a signal to China, to Russia, and of course to North Korea that this must be responded to. And such responses are always in conjunction with certain actions which take place on the southern part of the Korean Peninsula, that is South Korea, in conjunction with America, Japan, and other powers. So when you see these type of actions, they are signaling, they are also deterrence and warning. And this missile, which is Hwasong missile, which has a range of 15,000 kilometers, can carry a warhead about 1.5 tons, is a clear message to America that we have the capability of hitting you, and this is done on the behest of both Russia and China. Vineet.
Mr. Sachdev, as I pointed out in my opening monologue as well, China has expressed, in fact, a concern as well as backed Pyongyang when it comes to these missile tests. But at the same time, this is also destabilizing this region. This is an international threat. Obviously, the proximity between the Americans and the South Koreans is what North Korea says is the reason for it. But we all know Kim Jong-un has had plans to modernize the North Korean defense capabilities since a very long time. And like General Dwivedi just pointed out and enunciated that one of this missile has the capability of going about 15,000 kilometers. That means it can strike anywhere in the United States. So directly or indirectly, this is a message to the Americans as well.
Thank you so much, Vineet. Oh, absolutely. It's a clear-cut message to the Americans. And, as I think both our eminent panelists before and Professor Nalapat and General Dwivedi also said, see, for North Korea, put yourself in the shoes of a Kim. We and the world often, brands him as a madman. And put yourself in his shoes. What he is doing is actually pretty rational, or there is rational to it. If North Korea does not have a nuclear weapon, the fate of a North Korea would be similar, as I think Professor Nalpa mentioned, an Iraq, Saddam Hussein, or a Libya. It is common sense in today's day and age for a nation, I think, to have a nuclear weapon. If you look at the reality of what's around there, right? Otherwise, you are at someone's mercy or, on someone's whims and fancies. So he does need a nuclear deterrent. That's one, absolutely. And this one definitely is that they can reach the mainland of America. See, America does not fear anything in this world. The only thing it fears is anyone having the capabilities to reach American soil. So as of now, if it's the Soviets or the Russians, the Chinese, and now the North Koreans, right? Even Iran doesn't have, though Iran is supposedly an enemy again of America, but Iran doesn't have missiles right now which could reach the US, to the best of my understanding, right? But North Korea has. So that's why America is extremely sensitive to what North Korea is doing. On the other hand, for North Korea, it's a matter of being in the race, advancing the technologies. And by the way, North, even in the past century, has been quite advanced in science and technology. They had discovered nylon, which became a world revolutionary, material which we use every day, which DuPont patented and all. The North Koreans had an alternative which they had developed. So imagine if the plastic alternate had come from North Korea, it would have been something else. So North has a huge scientific base which they leverage. Now that being said, it's also once again a classic of mirror images in world affairs. I mean, here is South Korea. In fact, what also has added is that, the new government in the South is more, you could say, more right, more aggressive towards the North. When this new president, prime minister came, he said that they want a nuclear umbrella over South Korea, provided guaranteed by the US. In fact, within South Korea, there's a debate that how far can you go and trust the Americans, right? And so South Korea says that it wants to develop its own nuclear weapon. The US has been kind of, pushing it back, but then South says that you position some nuclear devices on our soil. Then you have the nuclear submarine comes calling. Then next year, they're planning joint exercises now. From the American and South Korean perspective, is a logical thing. They're saying, in case of a nuclear scenario, we want to exercise out what our response could be jointly, the US, Korea, and Japan. Now, North Korea here looks at it as a threat. South Korea has developed a special commando unit as part of their doctrine, wherein they say that if they anticipate that the North would launch an attack, within 12 hours, in the next 12 hours, if they have all the information that North is going to launch an attack, South Korean and American joint forces, special forces would go in, decapitate the leadership of the North, take out their command control, buildings, etc. And this is open out there. So if I as a North know that this is my South planning, of course, I'll plan out something else. So it's the typical spiral which is going out there.
Right. Professor Nalapat, in your opinion, sir, how is this tinkering, with the United States, which at this point in time is obviously distracted with what's going on between Israel and Hamas and what's also happening between Russia and Ukraine?
Vineet, you used the right word, distracted. And this is one more distraction. And frankly, a distraction that is publicly welcomed by China. Because, around the time of this particular launch, Wang Yi gave a very effusive statement about how close the relationship in the Koreans and the CCP are. He publicly said that. As there is very close coordination between China and North Korea on very many matters, also between North Korea and the Russians. They have been dealing with the Russians for a very long time, right from the current leader's grandfather's time. So the fact of the matter is that there is no question the Chinese would be delighted as many diversions as possible, so that should they decide to attack, let's say, for example, across the Taiwan Straits, all these diversions will work to dampen American resolve for getting involved in yet another conflict. And the second point is basically, should there be an attack by North Korea? Personally, to some extent, I'm familiar with the situation in Korea. I would say that more than South Korea, the country in real danger is Japan. There's a kind of visceral hatred of Japan in North Korea, which is fanned by their media, etc. Now, let's assume that the North Koreans attack Japan. And the Americans, of course, will then defend Japan. But let's assume that the America itself is at risk of being counterattacked by North Korea. Should they defend Japan, then America is put in a dilemma. How do you face a nuclear power? You're a nuclear power, but how do you face another nuclear power that has the capacity for a second strike? So I think that is where Kim Jong-un is working, that in case a situation comes when a conflict is there, but either South Korea or more likely, in my view, Japan, or more likely, if I view some American bases in the area, then the Americans will be dissuaded from a counterattack because they may, they may believe that then North Korea can attack a major US city with nuclear weapons. So this is the twin point. And as you as correctly said by the previous discussants, the Chinese are delighted. They want to create one more problem for the Americans. And they want to create one more diversion for the Americans and for others. And in North Korea, they have the ideal diversion, and that too, a nuclear armed diversion.
Jal Dwivedi, is this something that the world needs at this point in time? And what are the motivations, for North Korea, to get into such a situation whereby, I can say it with absolute clarity that 70% of the world is going to come against it?
Well, Vineet, first and foremost, I think Korean Peninsula is one of the global flashpoint for the simple reason that demilitarized zone, and I had the opportunity of visiting from the northern Korean side on more than one occasion, is the most heavily fortified defense line in the world. It's like a tripwire, and this flashpoint can be activated anytime, whenever Chinese so desire. And in fact, it's Chinese strategy that to create tension, they have Kim Jong-un as a great asset. And moment they give a signal to Kim Jong-un, then he undertakes such maverick action. And there's a lot of concern and also, I think, anxiety both in US, South Korea, and Japan. Point number one. Second issue that we need to understand is that America has its priority now in the Western Pacific. It may be involved in West Asia, but its focus is on Western Pacific right after 2011, when Obama enunciated the shift of doctrine and balancing toward the Western Pacific and to check out Chinese. And Chinese always keen that somehow the America is distracted either in Ukraine or in West Asia. So that's where Kim Jong-un is very handy. And my third and final point is that this is an area of concern because America has, as I said, 25,000 American troops are in South Korea and almost 40,000 in Japan and places like Okinawa. So in the moment this goes up, this is where the Americans will get directly involved, and that's what is not in the interest of either the global powers or America per se. But all I can say is that mostly it is orchestrated by China when they want to play a larger game, and Kim Jong-un plays into their hands. And Kim Jong-un importance is how it can show eyes to America, how it can, bring America into the zone of anxiety, and that's where his weapons or nuclear weapon capability is very, very paramount. Vineet.
Mr. Sachdev, this is the fifth launch by North Korea just this year. They definitely are preparing for war, but it's a country, which is opaque to the world. It's a country which obviously does not give away too much intelligence inputs as well. With China and North Korea, sort of coming together on this one, how do you see this situation panning out in the South China Sea as well, where the Americans feel, that they need to do more?
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't know. I think in the next few years, in the next 3 to 4 years, these seas would be scenes of heavy, action perhaps, by 2027, 28 or so, I would think, looking ahead. But coming back, you see a couple of things. North Korea has actually become even more bolder now. If we remember in 2006, the Russians had imposed sanctions, had gone along with the UN sanctions on North Korea when those sanctions were announced in response to the nuclear tests, right? But now, Russians are very much again fully with North Korea. So for North Korea, it's not only China has been, a partner supporter, but now Russia is becoming a proactive, partner. So 2 out of the 5 of the UN Security Council are with North Korea at this point. So North is a bit emboldened. Secondly, the ask from the Americans and the world community, I think is pretty, it's a stretch, it's too rich. The ask is that, okay, you have to promise to denuclearize yourself totally and only then the sanctions will be lifted. Now, that will not happen. So the ask from the Americans and the UN has to change. It has to come to some kind of a, de facto realization that yes, it has nuclear weapons, but yes, how to reduce the number of weapons they produce, etc., and then again back to some kind of engagement in the global community. But minus that, there is no way for the North Korea to, even pause its pursuit of the weapons that is developing and being technologically advanced. I am incidentally on a peace committee. The Winter Youth Olympics next year are being held in South Korea. And the organizing committee, they've set up a small subcommittee on public diplomacy between the North and South to try and make this Olympic as a joint hosting between the North and South. So by some whatsoever, I'm chairperson of this small committee. So, but the problem is that the North doesn't want to talk. Okay, so there is a divide. I mean, there are no communications. In fact, also this past week, one more development has happened. South Korea pulled back partially from an agreement about arming the soldiers who stand on the DMZ, right? In response, North Korea has totally pulled back from that entire agreement. So now what you're seeing is that because on the DMZ, soldiers are supposed to be very lightly armed. Okay, but now North Koreans are back that the North Korean soldiers on the DMZ side are fully armed more. So that's all provocative. Seoul is hardly 60 odd kilometers from the north, right? Their artillery, tanks, whatever, and they'll throw in men. They'll throw in men like cannon fodder. And Seoul, greater area, is 2/3 of the Korean economy. So for Koreans, it's a huge danger. And of course, Japan is out there, and now this reach to the Americas. So North is definitely a very strong problem area, a problem child, or whatever, let's say, for the world, especially in this region and for America. But it depends how the Chinese pan out with respect to their South China and Taiwan, etc. But yes, again, it cannot be ruled out that China could look to ratchet up indirectly through North some other, some other steps which could again not only distract, they could dilute the American forces also. You see, because if there's something, cooking up in the North and there's a threat to Japan, then how do you counter that here? There's a threat to Taiwan and something else happens. So it's not only distractions, but also dilution. And the American Navy, by the way, in the Asia Pacific is running low on the numbers. And the Americans are now quickly, getting back to production of their, naval warships and submarines, but their capacity is very low. It'll take them around 5 to 6 or maybe 10 odd years before Americans are able to start increasing their naval strength in this area. Till then, in fact, actually their Navy strength is going down because they're retiring ships. So dilution of where all and distraction would be and very much part of a master plan by the Chinese.
Absolutely, sir. Well, it is going to be a master plan on behalf of the Chinese. What they're up to is something that we can't confirm, but this event, or rather the series of events that we have seen coming out or emanating out of North Korea, does have the possibility of disrupting world peace. Not that world peace is not in peril already because of a couple of wars already going on. Professor Nalapat, General Dwivedi, Mr. Sachdev, appreciate you joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.